In January of 1982, my voice teacher told me that there was an opening in the bass section in the professional choir at Holy Name Cathedral. I didn't know anything about Holy Name Cathedral. I had never met Richard Proulx, but thanks to my voice teacher, I auditioned, I got in, and suddenly I was in the most extraordinary choral environment I had ever sung in. 16 phenomenal singers under this brilliant musician who heard everything. You couldn't get away with anything when you were singing with Richard. And to be part of an experience like that at that young age was absolutely formative on my entire aesthetic of choral music. And as it turned out, 6 of the original 9 singers in Chicago a cappella had sung with Richard at Holy Name at some point.
I think one of the very important things about him was his ability to get along with people. In many cases, making changes in music, getting people to do things, is somewhat of a selling job. And he was good at getting people to try things. He attracted for our choirs a lot of very fine talent.
At any given time, 50% of the people at Holy Name were visitors, and the rest were regular parishioners, and people came into town with the highest of expectations. That Holy Name was the place to go to where you would have the best representation of Catholic music in the Archdiocese of Chicago. So that's a big responsibility. Every function of the church was covered musically from a very accurate liturgical sense and artistically very sophisticated. So it was a pleasure working there, and you knew that you were part of something special, and it was all at Richard's hand.
I think the one thing that I admire the most and that I have learned the most from Richard is his ability to create a group of singers, and he understands the chemistry of singing so well.
I find him to be very kind. He never puts you on the spot if he feels that you've prepared. If you haven't prepared, watch out.
Cathedral Singers is an independent recording ensemble, and we began with singing, recording CDs, the Ars Antiqua series, which is very rewarding. And I remember once even saying to Richard, I think you found your new calling.
In our recording sessions, he's always incredibly prepared, and he usually rehearses a piece backwards, and by the time we get to the beginning, we're ready to record. He's amazingly efficient.
After the Vatican Council in the 1860s, so many of our services that had been in Latin now were in English. So at that time we had to have a lot of music written. Some of it was very good and some was very bad. But in that time when Richard came, the compositions that he wrote hit the people right. He became very much of a leading figure in the development of the English language music in the Catholic Church.
Richard, as a composer, has an incredible craft. I talked about his ability to write for congregation, but he also is, just fine at scoring for full choir, for strings, for brass. I mean, his command of his craft is amongst the finest.
Musicians who are largely in the church, they know him as the composer of anthems and certainly of incredibly unique service music. But what I feel as a conductor and as a colleague of Richard as a composer is that his art music is really the heart of his life. He has such scope in his writing and in his vision. His concerti, the instrumental music that he has composed, I don't think Richard is well enough known as a composer of orchestral music. His sonnets for piano and baritone. This is the side of Richard that I wish more people knew and loved and appreciated.
Richard has he's got a great sense of humor, and I remember when, he told me how to pronounce his name. He said, no, the X is silent. I said, oh, it's Proulx. He said, well, no, actually the L is silent. And I said, Proulx? He said, no, everything's silent. It's just Richard.
My favorite story, really early on, before the Flentrep organ was up in the gallery, they had a big organ. They called it Bertha, or Big Bertha. And Bertha had a telephone attached to it. And that was the only way that Richard and his associates could communicate with the sacristy, which is half a block away. So we'd be in the middle of this beautiful prelude and we'd have some big service that we were doing. They called them productions, by the way, which you should know. So we could be at the beginning of a big production and the phone would ring. And Richard would pick up and go, "Joe's Bar."
After a particularly important concert or recording session, Richard always takes the time to write a thank you note. Nobody does that anymore, and it's particularly endearing.
In my own work as a church musician, and I've done parish work for 47 years, Richard has always been my hero. You know, I don't claim that I'm a little Richard by any stretch, but he has had a tremendous influence on my own music making. I have always considered Richard the dean of church musicians in America.
Proulx is the most important composer and conductor of traditional Catholic church music in the country and has been for many years.
Richard's contribution to the choral world, I think, has been his ability to cross denominational lines. Richard's music is in Presbyterian hymnals, Roman Catholic hymnals, Anglican Episcopal hymnals, Lutheran hymnals. I would say he's in at least 25 different hymnals in this country. I would venture to say that Richard Proulx's music is the most performed music in this country every Sunday throughout the United States.
High church music is in somewhat short supply these days in every denomination, and it takes champions to do music of that quality and that caliber routinely as the standard practice, and Richard has always stood for that.
He's one of my favorite people.